All right, good morning. Welcome to Wednesday morning Bible study. We're glad that you've joined us, whether in person or online. We are, for your information, if you are not here this morning and you're looking to join us in person, we are no longer in the fellowship hall. We're in the library. And many folks have joined us that we haven't seen, some new faces in a while, and we're glad that they are present with us. We are looking through 1 Samuel. We've moved from last week looking at the circumstances prior to Samuel's birth, moved into his infancy and his childhood, and we're going to continue forward through his youth and through his young adulthood as we go through, beginning at chapter 4. But before we begin, we're going to have a word of prayer. We're going to have a special prayer this morning for Bob Britton as well. Thank you for sharing that prayer request with me. Let's pray. Father Almighty, we thank you for this day that you've given us. We thank you for the rain that nourishes the ground and cools the air. We thank you for the opportunity to be where we are, whether in this room or at home. We thank you that we can open up your word and see deeper into your character, see who you are and how you relate to each one of us as your children. We'd like to lift up, Lord, a special prayer for Bob. We thank you that your presence is with him as he has this procedure. We thank you that your hand rests upon not only him but his family. We ask for your healing touch, your recognition of presence among those who are lifting prayers for him and have great concerns for him. We ask that your will would be done and that you would give precision to any medical personnel as they take care of him and bring him to a better health. We thank you that in all of us, that you have provided so many great and wonderful opportunities of seeing your touch in our life, seeing your provision, seeing how you love us and take great care for us. And the many blessings in our life, Lord, we thank you for them. We ask all of this in your Son's name. Amen. Amen. So we begin chapter 4, 1 Samuel. If you'll indulge me, I've got a cough drop in. All right. Yes.
You know, Tammy, his husband died.
Yes. We heard that this morning and was greatly distressed. I'm going to call on them after we complete here. We've seen the movement of the priest Eli in his late adulthood. We've seen how the birth of Samuel was this instance that caused a great triumph in the life of Hannah and Hannah's prayer to the Lord for that, and how Samuel plays a part in the prophecy against Eli, and we'll see the fulfillment in that as we move through today's look at Scripture. And one of the most popular stories we see in 1 Samuel is the calling of Samuel. Many times we hear people referencing back to the Lord speaking to Samuel and how the Lord had not spoken such a way to this, that Eli, being as Eli was just like, hey, I'm not talking to you. Didn't even realize, okay, God's speaking to you. It was the third time that Eli had to be heard to hear from Samuel. It's God that's speaking. When you hear this again, you need to respond, speak, your servant's listening. And so we come to chapter 4. We see the very last bit of chapter 3 kind of blends in with chapter 4. And Samuel's word came to all of Israel. Samuel was one who lived righteously in the sight of the Lord, who desired to serve the Lord in all that he did in his work in the priestly duties that he had to do there in Shiloh. He did it with all his mind and all of his heart. We don't see that as much in Eli, though we know that he of course endeavored to do what he needed to do. And then his sons, quite unfortunately, were given the office of priest and lived quite unrighteously. They served their own ends rather than the people's ends. So we begin to see this come to light in our look in 1 Samuel today. Now the Israelites went out to fight against the Philistines. The Israelites camped at Ebenezer and the Philistines at Aphek. The Philistines deployed their forces to meet Israel, and as the battle spread, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 of them on the battlefield. the Israelites, they camped at a location called Ebenezer. As you might recall, Ebenezer, it means rock of help, and it's a term that's used to, in our terminology, really function as a monument. And Ebenezer, if we were to see a town called Monument, we'd know that's a place name. But we also know a monument to be a physical representation of something that happened. It's something to be as a reminder, something that people can stand before and see and touch and remember something that has happened. These Ebenezers were used throughout the Old Testament as reminders of what God had done. And so it means stone of help. This is where God helped us. And it can be recalled through oral tradition. Well, Father, what does this Ebenezer mean? Well, this Ebenezer was placed in recognition of God fighting our battle for us. God helped us in this battle, or we remember God doing this in our life. And so this place name is also called Ebenezer. They built their camp there. The Philistines built their camp. And the battle ensues, and Israel is defeated. About 4,000 of them were killed. But it wasn't a complete rout. It wasn't an utter devastation, because we see in the next verse, the soldiers returned to camp. The elders of Israel asked, "Why did the Lord bring defeat upon us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the Lord's covenant from Shiloh, so that it may go with us and save us from the hand of our enemies." So the people sent men to Shiloh, and they brought back the ark of the covenant of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim. And Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. So they're defeated. The Philistines are coming against them, and they are defeated. But they're able to return to camp, though many of them have been slain on the battlefield. And so their response to this is, well, let's just get the Ark of the Covenant. Let's have this ark with us as we charge into battle. Now, we may look back and see how the ark has been used in battle or something like that in the past, but that was at the Lord's leading. That was the Lord using that as a physical rallying point for his people. When you see the ark, this is where I am enthroned. When it was in the Holy of Holies, when it's in the tabernacle, God's presence was there between the wings of the cherubim. The ark was roughly the size of a cooler today. We think of that kind of size. And it had golden cherubim on it. And so it was placed in the Holy of Holies. And the atonement for God's people was done there at the ark. Inside was the staff of Aaron that budded. Inside was a jar of manna that didn't get yucky, as manna would do if they tried to hoard it together, but that did not. And it also was the Ten Commandments, these emblems that were pivotal and part and parcel to what God has done in the life of his people. So they take this, and rather than entreat God for victory, Lord, we have been defeated by the Philistines. We come before you humbly and seek your aid in this. Rather than coming like that, they take the Ark of the Covenant as kind of like a lucky charm, which is not just to be taken note of here, but this was a practice that we see in pagan cultures. They have this palladium, they have this statue, they have this idol that these pagan cultures would take with them into battle. They would refer to it as the weapon of the deity. That in secular pagan writings, a battle will ensue, and the weapon of Moloch, let's say, was taken by the enemy, which would have been the idol or that physical representation of that god. They're treating the Ark of the Covenant as a pagan idol, as a lucky charm. That, well, this will surely give us our victory that we want. I can't recall which theologian it was, but it was one from antiquity somewhere that said, we must be sure to not use what must be sacred not use what should be worshipped and not worship what must be used. In that we shouldn't take creation and lift it high, nor should we bring down what should be sacred and holy and bring it down to the level of creation. This was just the ark, but they were taking it and using something that was supposed to be holy and using it as just a lucky charm. In the same sense that we might look at communion, it is humble bread. It is the bread and the cup. It is an emblematic of the Lord's Supper, but in the same token, it's something that is supposed to be reverenced. It's not just a mid-service snack. We don't worship the Eucharist, the communion, Lord's Supper. We don't worship it, but it is something sacred. It is a sacrament given to us by Jesus to remember. Each week we remember, but it's not just, we're just having a snack. In the same way, they mistreated the Ark of the Covenant, and we see the results of that. Additionally, we noticed some names that we saw from last week. Hophni and Phinehas, these guys who were really up to no good. Not up to any good at all, and they're the ones who are accompanying the ark out. When the ark of the Lord's covenant came into the camp, all Israel raised such a great shout that the ground shook. Hearing the uproar, the Philistines asked, "What's all the shouting in the Hebrew camp?" When they learned that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp, the Philistines were afraid. "Our God has come into the camp," they said. "We're in trouble. Nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us! Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? They are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the desert. Be strong, Philistines. Be men, or you will be subject to the Hebrews as they have been to you. Be men and fight." They recall these events that happened many generations back when the Israelites came out of Egypt. And so it's of some renown of what the God of Israel has been up to and has been capable of. That it was the God of Israel who laid waste to the Egyptians and allowed the Israelites to come out from slavery. And the Philistines are going, they've brought their God in, as I'm sure the Philistines had brought theirs. I'm sure there was some kind of representation. We'll see later on Dagon coming into play. I'm sure there was some kind of Dagon with them. And yet this is the one that brings plagues, frogs and boils and rivers of blood. And we've never heard them raise a ruckus like this. We've instilled so much fear that they've been quiet. Yet they're in such an uproar, the ground is shaking. Well, we better steel ourselves for the battle that ensues. Verse 10, "So the Philistines fought, and the Israelites were defeated, and every man fled to his tent. The slaughter was very great. Israel lost 30,000 foot soldiers. The ark of God was captured, and Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, died." If we recall, because of their iniquity, we learned that the sons would die on the same day. And this comes to pass, that they died in this battle. As they accompanied the ark into battle, they died as judgment for what they had lived, these lives of given the office of priest, but not at all living up to what was required of them. And the ark was captured. It was taken by the Philistine army. Verse 12, "That same day a Benjamite ran from the battle line and went to Shiloh, his clothes torn and dust on his head. When he arrived, there was Eli sitting on his chair by the side of the road, watching, because his heart feared for the ark of God. When the man entered the town and told what had happened, the whole town sent up a cry. Eli heard the outcry and said, 'What is the meaning of this uproar?' The man hurried to Eli, who was 98 years old and whose eyes were set so that he could not see. He told Eli, 'I have just come from the battle line. I fled from it this very day.' Eli asked, 'What happened, my son?' The man who brought the news replied, 'Israel fled before the Philistines, and the army has suffered heavy losses. Also, your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured.'" This messenger, this Benjamite, he seems to go in order of most devastating news to Eli. Not only have we lost another battle, not only have we suffered great losses in this battle, but also your sons, Hophni and Phinehas, have died, as well as the Ark of the Covenant has been captured. When he mentioned the Ark of God, Eli fell backwards off his chair by the side of the gate. His neck was broken, and he died, for he was an old man and heavy. He had led Israel for 40 years. For 40 years, he had served in this capacity, and his end comes at the news that the ark has been stolen. Even more so than the news of his sons. He was told that this would occur, but the Ark of the Covenant, which was his responsibility as one who was leading Shiloh in this capacity, has been stolen. We see reason being that when he fell, because he was heavy. We heard before that he had been benefiting from the deceit that his sons were doing and taking the choice pieces of meat, and we see that he had taken that as well. Eating all the rich food had made him heavy. And so that was one of the reasons why when he fell, it was fatal for him. Well, the bad news doesn't end there. Verse 19, his daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant near the time of delivery. When she heard the news that the ark of God had been captured and that her father-in-law, her husband, were dead, she went into labor and gave birth, but was overcome by her labor pains. As she was dying, the woman attending her said, "Don't despair. You've given birth to a son." But she did not respond or pay any attention. The midwife is seeking to encourage her to build up her morale, that though there is a lot going on, that in the face of all of this, she's given birth to a son. But she doesn't pay attention. She's too despondent at this point. She named the boy Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel," because of the capture of the ark of God, the deaths of her father-in-law and her husband. She said, "The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured." She recognizes the gravity of the situation. And she names her son Ichabod, which means no glory, or glory departed. It's a very despondent place in her passing. It's a great wave of bad news and ill have been brought on the people of Israel. But it kind of marks the closing of this already very dark time in this age that they've lived under. And for the 40 years of Eli, there has not been a strong devotion to the Lord. It seems to be more of just a rote passing through of just doing what must be done. There is not this great amount of repentance, great amount of fasting or praying or laboring unto the Lord, just going through the motions. And so we have this wave of awful things that happen, but they close that door as the time of Samuel marches forward. We don't hear much of Samuel in these chapters, but we do following this. Beginning here in chapter 5, we see what is happening in the camp of the Philistines. What's going on here with the Philistines? Chapter 5. After the Philistines had captured the ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then they carried the ark into Dagon's temple and set it beside Dagon. When the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon, fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. They took Dagon and put him back in his place, but the following morning when they rose, there was Dagon falling on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. His head and hands had been broken off and were lying on the threshold. Only his body remained. That is why to this day neither the priest of Dagon nor any others who enter Dagon's temple at Ashdod step on the threshold. What an incredible narrative we have here. One that I kind of personally enjoy. I'm not ashamed to say that when they bring in the ark, they give it a place of, I'll say, reverence. It is placed beside Dagon in Dagon's temple. Sort of, if you kind of read through kind of what commentary says, that the reason they did this was to Well, where else do you put a God? In their mindset, well, this is the God of the Israelites, and where shall we put it? Well, we'll put it in our temple, because their God didn't protect them. And so this God was doing us a solid. So we'll go ahead and give it kind of a little place of honor. You can sit with our God in its temple, and this will be the good place for you to keep it safe, because this God offered unto them, in their eyes, a victory. Well, you've kind of left your people behind, and so we'll put you in our temple. But imagine their surprise when they come into that temple and their God, made of stone or metal or whatever, is laying prostrate before the ark. It is on its face in worship before the ark. Well, that must be, this is kind of strange. We'll just put him back up, because this God who we've crafted with ears and eyes and a mouth can surely hear our cries and whatnot, even though he's just a block of wood. We'll put him back up. Our Mr. Potato Head of sorts that we bow down to. We're going to put him back up. The next day, not only is he laying prostrate again, and imagine what would have to happen for this to occur. His head and hands are broken off, are severed from the idol, and have skittered across the floor to the threshold of the temple. One commentator put, it's as if Dagon was trying to crawl from his very own temple and only got to the threshold. That he was fleeing from the presence of where, God wasn't seated there. His presence was not there, but God's presence would dwell there. And even as the ark was a holy sort of relic, a representation of God's presence with his people, that they would flee, that his hands and feet, which in pagan culture were delivered as trophies in some cases, they would deliver the head in the hands of defeated enemies, that this Dagon, before even the ark of God had been laid down in defeat and in worship of one who is the one true God, hands and feet broken off. You think of how this naturally may have occurred, that it struck the ground with such force that the head and the hands shattered off and flew across the floor and were laying on the threshold, or that God himself would strike that down and cause and intricately place the head and hands of this idol upon the threshold, to the point where it is recognized among those pagans, well, we're not going to touch the threshold. Our God was laid low by the God of Israel, and its hands and feet were placed as trophies upon the threshold of its very temple. Verse 6, the Lord's hand was heavy upon the people of Ashdod and its vicinity. He brought devastation upon them and afflicted them with tumors. When the men of Ashdod saw what was happening, they said, the ark of God of Israel must not stay here with us, because his hand is heavy upon us and upon Dagon our God. Well, they witnessed what happened to Dagon in the presence of the ark. Can't stay here. So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and asked them, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? They answered, have the ark of the God of Israel moved to Gath. So they moved the ark of the God of Israel. But after they moved it, the Lord's hand was against that city, throwing it into great panic. He afflicted the people of the city, both young and old, with an outbreak of tumors. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. As the ark of God was entering Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, they have brought the ark of the God of Israel around to us to kill us and our people. So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and said, send the ark of God of Israel away. Let it go back to its own place, or it will kill us and our people. For death had filled the city with panic. God's hand was very heavy upon it. Those who did not die were afflicted with tumors, and the outcry of the city went up to heaven. That this huge uproar, every city that this ark passes into, the hand of God is laid heavy upon it. There is judgment and devastation that's wreaking havoc, to the point where the people, they see it coming in. And they're like, oh, no. You're not bringing that thing into our city. We've seen what's happened in these other cities. You're not going to bring that in here. No way. And so they come up with the idea, we need to send it back. We need to just return it. We've made a mistake. So we begin chapter 6. When the ark of the Lord had been in Philistine territory 7 months, the Philistines called it for the priests and the diviners and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us how we should send it back to its place." They answered, "If you return the ark of God of Israel, do not send it away empty, but by all means send a guilt offering to him. Then you will be healed, and you will know why his hand has not been lifted from you." The Philistines asked, "What guilt offering should we send him?" They replied, 5 gold tumors and 5 gold rats, according to the number of the Philistine rulers, because the same plague has struck both you and your rulers. Make models of the tumors and of rats that are destroying the country, and pay honor to Israel's God. Perhaps he will lift his hand from you and your gods and your land. Why do you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh did? When he treated them harshly, did they not send the Israelites out so they could go on their way? So we see kind of a greater idea as to what sort of tumors they're dealing with. We see golden tumors and we see golden rats. Now, hindsight being 2020, we connect these sort of things with the bubonic plague. These tumors being buboes, swollen lymph nodes that we know were caused by rats. They perhaps look at this, and this is supposition, as, okay, there is this great incursion of rats. At the same time, we have these tumors. They may not have seen those as being, okay, the rats have come, bubonic plague, this is why we have it, but they know that these two things occurred concurrently. And so it may have been tumors, may have been hemorrhoids, may have been all sorts of things. But when you have rats and tumors labeled together, we have to say that this must have been what was laid upon these towns. The plague was laid upon them as the ark came in. And so they in their own sort of voodoo mindset, well, if we make images of what has been brought against us, perhaps this God will take pity on us. In their pagan mindset, they're going about their own pagan ways of trying to rid themselves of what has happened to them. And the witch doctors, the diviners, the pagan priests, this is their instruction to them, is to make images of gold of what has been brought against them. Now then, get a new cart ready with 2 cows that have calved and have never been yoked. Hitch the cows to the cart, but take their calves away and pin them up. Take the ark of the Lord and put it on the cart, and in a chest beside it put the gold objects you're sending back to him as a gold offering, guilt offering. Send it on its way, but keep watch of it. If it goes up to its own territory, toward Beth Shemesh, then the Lord has brought this great disaster on us. But if it does not, then we will know that it was not his hand that struck us and that it happened to us by chance. They're taking this opportunity as they return it to figure out, okay, was this the God that was doing this, or is this just something that has occurred to us by chance? This is their test to see if this God of Israel is the one doing it. So they did this. They took 2 such cows and hitched them to the cart and pinned up their calves. They placed the ark of the Lord on the cart, and along with it the chest containing the gold rats and the models of the tumors. Then the cows went straight up toward Beth Shemesh, keeping on the road and lowing all the way. They did not turn to the right or to the left. The rulers of the Philistines followed them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. Now the people of Beth Shemesh were harvesting their wheat in the valley. When they looked up, they saw the ark. They rejoiced at the sight. The cart came to the field of Joshua, Beth Shemesh, and there it stopped beside a large rock. The people chopped up the wood of the cart and sacrificed the cows as burnt offering to the Lord. The Levites took down the ark of the Lord, together with the chest containing the gold objects, and placed them on the large rock. On that day, the people of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and made sacrifices to the Lord. The 5 rulers of the Philistines saw all this and then returned the same day to Ekron. So they found out it was indeed the Lord that had done this to them. Those cows were resolute in bringing the ark back to the people of Israel. When the people of Israel saw this, that the ark had returned, their immediate response was one that's laudable. They took the only available wood they had, which was the cart, chopped it down, and they offered the cows as a sacrifice. In response to the Lord has delivered us the ark back, our first response must be to offer a sacrifice as thanks unto the Lord. And they took this time, the return of the ark, as a chance to thank the Lord for this. A laudable response, a logical response. These are the gold tumors the Philistines sent as a guilt offering to the Lord, each one for Ashdod, Gaza, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. And the number of the gold rats was according to the number of the Philistine towns belonging to the 5 rulers, the fortified towns with their country villages. The large rock on which they set the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh. You might even say an Ebenezer. But God struck down some of the men of Beth Shemesh, putting 70 of them to death because they looked into the ark of the Lord. The people mourned because of the heavy blow the Lord had dealt them, and the men of Beth Shemesh asked, "Who can stand in the presence of the Lord, this holy God? To whom will the ark go up from here?" Now, they had been told from early on that this was, the ark was holy. It was not to be touched, and the proper way to carry the ark and to do everything according to the Lord's will. And so to just walk up to it and peek in it, as if it was just some box of trinkets. It was, if the people of Israel had been true to what God had told them, had kept this as a part of their, whether these men knew not to or not, they would have known had they abstained true to the God of Israel. God told them, this is holy, don't touch. Use the poles that you have made for it to carry it. The Levites, they knew to do this. And thankfully so. The Levites knew how to carry the ark as it should be. They placed it on the rock. But some of these other folks, as they looked on, they touched it, and 70 of them, they died. And so they asked, where does it need to go now? Then they sent messengers to the people of Kiriath Jearim, saying, "The Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to your place." We got the ark. Why don't you take it? They've suffered a heavy blow in Beth Sheresh. And so they to this other town, Kiriath Jearim, why don't you take the ark? So the men of Kiriath Jearim came and took the ark of the Lord. They took it to Abinadab's house on the hill and consecrated Eleazar, his son, to guard the ark of the Lord. This was an important task. This wasn't just, "Look here, son, why don't you just keep an eye on the ark?" They consecrated him as one who was going to guard the ark and to be caretaker of the ark. It seemed they'd learned from their misuse of the ark. We need to treat this carefully. Verse 2, it was a long time, 20 years in all, that the ark remained in Kiriath Jearim, and all the people of Israel mourned and sought after the Lord. And Samuel said to the whole house of Israel, "If you are returning to the Lord with all your hearts, then rid yourselves of foreign gods and Ashtoreths, and commit yourself to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines." So the Israelites put away their Baals and Ashtoreths and served the Lord only. We see again Samuel's righteousness, his earnest desire to live according to what God had instituted for his people to live as. They were called out of Egypt, out of slavery. They were called into the promised land. They were called to be his people. And over, the cycle that we see in the lives of the Israelites, unfortunately in our own lives, that cycle of desire to live righteously, to be refined into God's people, and the falling away. And this, it was generations that would pass when it was either deep in iniquity, living as mixing pagan practices into their worship, or it was perhaps even more unfortunately, as we saw in the time of Eli, living as lukewarm believers, living as ones who were just merely going about what they were supposed to do. The Feast of Atonement would come through, and they would do the what they needed to do, and very few were serious about what God had called them to do. And Samuel comes into the scene and says, "Folks, we need to purify ourselves. We need to." It says if you, because there's this long time, and all the people, they're mourning, they're seeking after the Lord. There is this contrite spirit there. Samuel says, well, this is what you need to do. If you want to return to the Lord, you have to do so with all your heart, and you have to rid yourselves of the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths, which were these images that they would have on their land that were just idols. They weren't just nice statues. They weren't art. They were idols. Only purpose. They had integrated pagan customs and pagan worship into their daily lives. Samuel says, you got to get rid of all that. Got to cut them down. And this is not the first time. We saw it with Gideon. Gideon had to tell the people the same thing. Cut down your Asherah poles, burn them, return to the Lord. Again and again, God's prophet calls unto them, return to the Lord. Commit yourselves to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. Put away your Baals, your Ashtoreths. Serve the Lord. Keyword, only. Oh, but we're honoring the Lord. We're offering sacrifices to him, as well as to Baal. We want to cover our bases. We want to make sure we're just doing all that we can. I'm trying to think of the movie I saw it in. I think it was The Mummy or something, where it was the Mummy. The Mummy is approaching this man, and he pulls out a cross and earnestly begins praying, and the mummy still comes. And so he pulls out a Star of David, and he starts praying in Hebrew, and mummy's still coming. So he pulls out another emblem, and then he pulls out all these other emblems, and he starts praying in the many sort of different things, trying to find which God will save him. And that's Israel. We're just going to cover our bases. We're going to bring in all these pagan customs, but we're not going to serve the Lord only. Samuel says, you got to. Verse 5, then Samuel said, assemble all Israel at Mizpah, and I will intercede with the Lord for you. When they had assembled at Mizpah, they drew water and they poured it out before the Lord. On that day they fasted, and there they confessed, we have sinned against the Lord. And Samuel was leader of Israel at Mizpah. They don't have a monarchy at this point. They're living in what could be a theocratic government, where it is the lack of a better word, the church that is governing. There is small local governing, but there is not one great government. And so at this point, they're looking at Samuel to lead them, that he is calling them to righteousness. They see the need to return unto the Lord, that the hand of the Lord is mighty, and that they need to get their ducks in a row. They need to return back to right worship, and they look to Samuel to lead them in that. When the Philistines heard that Israel had assembled in Mizpah, the rulers of the Philistines came up to attack them. The Philistines are always up to something. They're always looking to come at the Israelites. And so they heard, hey, there's going to be a lot of Israelites. They're at Mizpah. Let's attack them there. Having learned nothing from their god Dagon being cast down. They don't remember the tumors, the buboes, the rats. But on we go. When the Israelites heard of it, now they heard of this attack. They got word of the ambush. When they heard of it, they were afraid because of the Philistines. And they said to Samuel, they said to Samuel, do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may rescue us from the hand of the Philistines. So they go to Samuel. They run to this. This is someone who's speaking the truth, and our hearts are hearing it. They go to Samuel, cry out to the Lord on our behalf. So Samuel took a suckling lamb and offered it as a whole burnt offerings to the Lord. He cried out to the Lord on Israel's behalf, and the Lord answered him. The scripture says the prayers of a righteous man avails much. Verse 10. While Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to engage Israel in battle. But that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines and threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. The men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah, pursued the Philistines, and slaughtering them along the way to the point below Beth-kar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shin. He named it Ebenezer. Again, we have this representation. May we never forget what God has done on our behalf. You know, they didn't take a rock and carve in it. Look what the Israelite army did against the Philistines. No, he took that rock between Mizpah and Shin. He named it Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far has the Lord helped us." Look how far the Lord has gone before us to fight our battle. The Lord has won this victory. So the Philistines were subdued and did not invade Israelite territory again. So that they learned their lesson at this point. The God of Israel is one to fear and reverence. Even among pagans, they see the power of God. Throughout Samuel's lifetime, the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines. The towns from Ekron to Gath that the Philistines had captured from Israel were restored to her, and Israel delivered the neighboring territory from the power of the Philistines. And there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. Israel continued as judge over Israel all the days of his life. From year to year he went on a circuit, from Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah, judging Israel in all those places. But he always went back to Ramah, where his home was, and there he also judged Israel. And he built an altar there to the Lord. We see this interaction of Israel and the Philistines. We see Samuel coming in at really just that point of no return and calling the people of Israel back unto the Lord and getting their minds focused on the way that they should be going. And in that, the Philistines are routed. And they no longer come against the people of Israel until during the lifetime of Samuel. And the places that the Philistines had taken, where they placed seats of power for themselves in the land given by God to the Israelites, are taken back. Thankfully so. And so Samuel is lifted up as a judge, as a leader, as one who's going to lead the people of Israel, as the judges before him had done. So we certainly have time to move into chapter 8. We're moving right along. When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as judges for Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah, and they served at Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. And it's distressing to see, because this is what occurred with Eli. That the very same thing happened. That you have someone who is dedicated. In Eli's case, marginally so. In Samuel's case, well, it's well evidenced that he's dedicated to serving righteously, and in place of high respect and who people look at for leadership. And the sons, they go aside. With Joel and Abijah, they do not live as they should. And in much of the same sort of ways that Hophni and Phinehas did, this dishonest gain and serving themselves. Verse 4, so all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." The people of Israel, well, they see what all the other kids in the playground have, and they want it. We want a king too. See, your sons, we don't want to follow them. At least they have enough sense to say, they're doing wrong. We're not going to follow in your line. We want a king. But when they said, "Give us a king to lead us," they displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king." Oh dear. "As they have done from the day I brought them out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will do." They want a king. They see, well, the Philistines have a king, and the Amorites have a king, and the Amalekites have a king, and the Mosquitobites have a king, and we want a king. And they have a leader who is doing rightly. Now, the sons are not doing rightly. This is true, but they seem to be using the sons as a scapegoat to say, well, we need a king. But Samuel isn't doing anything, and apparently he's doing a better job of reining in his sons than Eli was. Eli was brought under indictment for not controlling his sons. It would seem that Samuel is doing all that he can, but we can't control other people fully. They're still continuing in that. And they say, unto Samuel, we want a king. And Samuel's like, if you were to have a king, God would have offered a king to you. He would have brought you to this, and it displeases him. And so he is encouraged by the Lord. Look, you need to let them know what they're asking for. Verse 10, Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, this is what the king who will reign over you will do. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and still others will make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take 1/10 of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants. Your men servants and maid servants and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, and the Lord will not answer you in that day. They have forsaken the Lord again. They have not desired to live under the statutes that God has put under them. God, in this time, in this covenant, has given humanity the benefit of the doubt that they could live, as far as their power lies, righteously. God never taught, God allowed humankind to live with a benefit of the doubt that they could live righteously, that they could follow the statutes. And we have proven, humanity has proven over and over that we can't, that we desire what we want more than what God wants of us. So it is laid out in no uncertain terms. This sounds like as you would expect a king would do. The king's going to say, I want my piece of all of this. You're going to offer me the best that you have. You're going to show fealty to me as your king. You're going to give me the best things, and I'm going to give them to my friends. This is not at all uncommon among monarchies. God isn't telling them anything I'm sure they didn't already expect or know. Yet Samuel lays this out. You can expect this from the king that you desire so greatly. Now, of course, Israel's going to go, well, that doesn't sound like much fun. They're going to say, forgive us, O Lord, for forsaking you. Naturally, after hearing that, they're going to say that. Verse 19, but the people refused to listen to Samuel. No, they said, we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations with a king to lead us and go out before us and fight our battles. They had the Lord who went out and fought their battles. They witnessed the Lord thundering before the Philistines and driving them off. They witnessed the Lord do that, and still they say, we want a king like all the other boys and girls on the playground who have the bright, shiny new thing. We want a king who will do all that these other nations. It would seem Israel desires to be like all the others. We want to be like all the others. But God didn't call them to be like all the others. Israel was to be like none of the others. That while the others were bereft in devastation and pagan and gods like Mr. Potato Heads who have ears that can't hear, have lips but can't speak. Their God stood to fight their battles and protect them and called them to only listen and learn and live in fellowship with him. And they couldn't do that. They wanted to be like the rest. And so they were given a warning. They said, doesn't matter. Still want a king. Then Samuel heard what all the people said, and he repeated it before the Lord, and the Lord answered, listen to them. Give them a king. How often is this a character trait we see in the Lord, in that we kick and scream and we are given what we have asked for, and when we get the just deserves of what we asked, we say, Lord, why'd you let that happen? It's like, well, there are consequences to things, and when we see, if we stop and we counsel before the Lord and we hear and see within ourselves what we know is to be true, yet we fight against it, and it happens, and our finger goes directly, Lord, you let this happen to me. No, the Lord let us witness this consequence of what we ourselves have desired. Then Samuel said to the men of Israel, everyone go back to his town. Go back to your own towns. And so we'll pause here and begin with the fulfilling of what the people so long desired. We know that, looking back, we know that God had a king for them, that he would place it, and this king would live righteous and be one to be lauded. But the one that they wanted, wasn't at all what they ultimately wanted. Let's close in prayer. God, our thanks and praise to you for this day, now and always. We ask that as we depart, that you would be with those who are heavy upon our hearts, who need your healing, who need your love, who need your presence. We ask that you would be amongst us and within us and about us as we go out into our lives, and so that we may speak your words of peace, that we would be agents of your grace, that we would be beacons of your love to the people that we encounter, and to the world around us would see you within us as the one who has redeemed us and saved us and loved us so greatly. For all this we ask in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.